Good evening. This is Kick on Healthy Relationships to the Curb. I'm Steve Vaccaro. Stephanie McPhail will not be on the show today. It's election day in some parts of our country, so she is doing her thing and supporting the efforts of people voting in her area, which is Texas. So we're going to miss Stephanie today, but we're going to have an amazing show. We have a really special guest, Dr. Z. Michelle will join us in a few moments. And we want to welcome you for joining us for another edition of Kick on Healthy Relationships to the Curb. We're here every Tuesday night from 6 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're also on Spectrum and Fios and Cablevision and BronxNet. So you want to check your local listings for that. We're also on radio stations in New York and soon to be again in St. Petersburg, Clearwater, and the Tampa area starting next week. So we're very excited about some of the things that we're doing. And since Stephanie's not here, let me explain a little bit about what Chapters is all about. We're a program that kind of is a foundation or a platform for other nonprofits, other programs that want to establish or have a voice for themselves through networking, collaboration. We provide that platform and support. So we're constantly doing community work in each community for giving back to if they need food or medical supplies or books or clothing. We're going to be actually in Long Island in Valley Stream on March 9th, giving toys and food and clothing to a community in need at that point in time. But we do a lot of shows. We have like 10 shows on our network, a couple of radio shows. And today is Kick on Healthy Relationships to the Curb, which we've been doing for almost 4 years now. But I want to start off with a little video. It's a little kind of in line of what we do here on the show. I want to get your thoughts after you watch it. Let's check it out.
So what's up, Dad? Is my wife okay?
I think you should admit for examination.
No, she's perfectly healthy. You can go home.
I thought so. Let's go, dear. Let's go.
Stop yelling at me!
You belong to me and must listen to what I say.
Get in the car! Now!
Come on in. Hi, officer. What can I help you with today?
I'm actually fine. Tell me, please, do you know this girl?
No, I don't. Why?
Lucy hasn't been in touch for weeks. Her parents are worried about her. She has an abusive boyfriend.
That's terrible.
I found out that Lucy had an appointment with you.
No, doesn't ring the bell. I have a lot of patients coming in. Oh, I'm sorry, you're taking up the next patient's time, so please clear the office. I have people to help. I used to think that other people's problems were none of my business. Let them deal with it themselves.
That's a video that I wanted to show there to let people know that. What's your thoughts on that? I know Stephanie was on the show. She would have her thoughts, but clearly the doctor made a decision of not to get involved, which could cost a life. And I think in a lot of domestic violence situations, I think that is not the thing to do. I think we need to all tell what we see and what we observe in a prompt manner. So I just wanted to show that video. I know it's a very extreme, but it's happening each and every day. And I think that when we see things like this, we really have to kind of take a mental inventory of where we're at with things or what we see around us. And if we can do a better job to spot someone that might be in danger in a domestic violence situation or anybody that needs help in any way, I think turning our backs or doing the silent treatment or not getting involved is not the way to go. So I just wanted to start the show off with that. But we have an exciting guest, Dr. Z. Michelle. She's from the San Diego area, California. So we want to welcome her to the show. Michelle, you there?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us in sunny California.
It is sunny today. I was sharing with you that we have had some weather here. It's been a little wet.
Yes,
but
yes.
We're not complaining. Usually it's very dry. So
yes, we before the show we define what weather is for you and what weather is for me, but we won't go into that. It's a whole different show.
That is a whole different show.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about what you just saw about, people getting involved, not getting involved in situations? What's your thoughts?
It's so triggering, the video that you showed. And one of the things that I recognized with the woman was very blatant about asking for help.
Right.
The help, the showing her wrist, I think I should be admitted. Oftentimes women don't feel like they can speak up, or even in that kind of overt or covert way. So I found that very interesting, that despite the very clear signals that this woman was being abused, that the doctor refused to acknowledge it. And like you said, it does happen all the time. Not wanting to get involved, it's none of my business. What am I going to do? I mean, how am I, it's the individual's, the blame. So I think that oftentimes I know that women get blamed and shamed for a lot of things, including getting abused.
Right.
You must have been asking for it. You probably didn't, weren't in line. You probably weren't listening. I mean, all these things that we have been indoctrinated, right? And so we end up taking the blame and the shame. And, sexual assault is another example of, what were you wearing? Did you leave your drink unattended? Were you alone? I mean, all these blame and shame, so that we are silenced. And really, we need to start calling out people, and most of the time it is men, that are doing this to women.
Right. I agree wholeheartedly with you say. There was a big case in New York that there was a Central Park jogger, a woman that was violently murdered a couple years back, and they were concerned about what was she doing in the park at that time. So that's what you're saying, I imagine.
Completely, like blaming the victim, or well, in this case the victim, because she didn't survive. A lot of people refer to the survivor, and it's so insidious. This what were you wearing? What were you it's the blame is on the woman, and not on the cultural norms of, we blame women. We have this long list of how to protect yourself, but we don't have the cultural upbringing of men in this toxic masculine world, where, hey, you got some, and hey, it's another notch, or she didn't say, she did say no, but that she didn't mean it, that kind of thing. So we have a lot of work to do around disrupting the cultural norms around sexual abuse, around emotional abuse, around toxic relationships. We have a lot. And the first thing that I feel like we need to do is we need women to understand their self-worth. Right. That you deserve more than this. You don't deserve this. And so oftentimes we internalize that shame and blame, so that we do blame ourselves, and that we don't feel like we're worthy of a healthy relationship, or this is all that I can get. I'm going to fix him. I'm going to fix the relationship. I think we need to teach our girls very early on about their self-worth, and about their, my friend calls it self-devotion, to really practicing self-devotion and love towards yourself, so that you don't put up with all the BS and the abuse out there.
Right. Well said. This is Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. I'm your host, Steve Vaccaro, and our guest, Dr. Z. Michelle. Michelle, talk about the work that you do and how you got into it to begin with.
Yeah, so I started Representation Rebellion, which is a movement about disrupting the stories they sell and tell about us. I was 45 years old at the time. I was working at UC San Diego, top of my game, working with a large community health projects in the community. I was remarried. I have 3 beautiful, healthy children. I was just really feeling it, right? And a number of women, like 3 or 4 women within a month, colleagues came to me and said, when you're 50, you become invisible. And I was like, no, not for me. So I decided to show them, and I went back and I got my PhD at 50.
Wow.
It started at 48.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And I got it at 52, and it was the best and worst of times. The first class in leadership that I had, there wasn't one woman mentioned. And I was like, holy cannoli. You can't be what you can't see, right? So for 4.5 years, I didn't see women in leadership positions. And I certainly didn't see women my age in leadership positions. And then I started to look out on the outside. I was like, well, this just isn't happening at USD. This is happening throughout the world, and throughout the culture. So I started this Representation Rebellion, Doctor of Disruption, disruptive storytelling, around disrupting these cultural stories about middle-aged women being invisible. Not that we're not, we don't fit the traditional norm of a 21-year-old thin body, long, all these kinds of outward appearances. So I'm really trying to elevate women's voices and stories, because once you get women together and they go, wow, I thought I was the only one that experienced this, and all of a sudden you're realizing that almost everyone in that group, every woman has had some kind of experience around whatever you're talking about. So I'm really working on LinkedIn specifically around trying to get these voices and stories out there, and also practicing the idea of being and self-worth. And I always said that the reason why I often use my daughters as ways of thinking about my own self-worth. Like, would I want my daughters to talk this negative? Would I want my daughters to be in this kind of relationship? Would I want my daughters not to have their voice heard? So a lot of this I do, because I have daughters, and it's really been my inspiration.
So you definitely pivoted during that time for yourself, and it must have been, like you said, good times, bad times, but you really turned things around and using that experience to do what you do now.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, I learned so much about myself and so much about culture, and so much, the growth that I experienced was personally and professionally was unbelievable. And I wouldn't have done it if women hadn't come to me and said, you could become invisible, because gosh darn, I turned 60 in October of last year, and I am fired up. I am, I don't care anymore. I spent like at least probably close to 4 decades of doing and, getting A's and getting, degrees and getting the job and getting the husband and getting children and getting and doing that, and paying attention to the others, what others had, comparing myself and, and am I keeping up with the Joneses and all that? And now I'm like, I don't give a rat's what people think about me. I really, really don't. I'm only human, so I'm speaking from a very good place. January and February, we all should be hibernating. And that's kind of what I did. I just kind of checked out. It was winter time even in San Diego. And I just was like, I'm going to just regroup. I'm not going to go out there and fight the fight. I'm just going to regroup. And now in March, I'm fired up and ready to support and promote women. And I'm ready to put myself out there and say, yeah, I'm pissed. Yeah, it's not fair. This is unjust. And how do we fix that?
Right. If you had to complete this sentence, it's never too late. How would you complete that sentence?
It's never too late to be your authentic self and do whatever the falafel you want to do with your life. My goal is to actually encourage, I work mostly with middle-aged women because it happens to be my age, and it actually happens to be a big crossroads for women because hormonally, menopause, So, gosh, we're not viable. We're not, we can't give birth. And so if that was part of your identity, all of a sudden, and menopause f's with you. I mean, there's a lot of hormonal and psychological changes. So, I just recognizing that I would like to accelerate this learning of being who you are, really loving yourself, and doing whatever the heck you want to do at a younger age. And I think the younger generation is like, my daughters are millennials. They'll be 35 and 32. And I think they live in a very different world than I grew up in. And I think, some of the narrative is changing, but certainly there's still stats out there and research that shows that women aren't, getting into executive positions. They only get 2% of venture capital funding. Most NIH, National Institutes of Health funding, are given to men. There are more men being published. I mean, there's lots of evidence that we have a lot to work on.
Do you think, if you look back on the pandemic, was that helpful or hurtful to the work that you are doing now?
I disliked it immensely, but I think it was helpful. I think we are now talking about mental health. We are now talking about isolation and the pandemic of loneliness. We are talking about identity. We're talking about disconnection. So all these things that have happened as a result of the pandemic, and also the previous presidency, have shown the cracks and the fissures that we were ignoring, because we live in the greatest country in the world, and it's a lot worse in other countries, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when you had the pandemic, all of a sudden, there was no hiding how lonely we were. When you can't when you can't get in your car and go to work and then go out to dinner and then go, you're just sitting there with yourself and you're going, geez Louise. So it really has helped with the discussion and with the awareness. What I'm having, and I'm sure you've found this in the work that you do, what I'm finding is, now what? What are the actionable steps? Like, we've raised the awareness. We know there's an issue with mental health and loneliness and, disparities and all these other things. Now what do we do?
Right.
And sometimes it can be very, hopeless, right? It seems overwhelming. Like, that's a big thing to do, right?
Right. Do you draw from the experience that you've gone through, and do you share that experience with the clients that you work with?
Yeah, I always on LinkedIn and anything that I post, I always bring a personal story, because storytelling is the thing that connects us. So that's why I do the storytelling, because it is the only way that we can develop empathy, and it's the only way that we can understand that we are all connected and that we are human beings. So I always bring my personal story, very authentic, very raw, very real. And I do that because I know that it will help others. I know that some woman will identify. There was a quote that said, "The greatest agony is not telling your story." And the amount that it can do for other people. So I always start out with my personal story. Then I follow it up with research or some kind of grounding that, this is like about trauma or about statistics or whatever that is. And then I always do like a call to action. And that's the way I feel like, having these kind of conversations, like that's the way that I feel like I'm going to, and I am actually impacting the world, and when I first got out of the doctoral program, I was like, I'm going to start Representation Rebellion, and it's all going to be about helping, Black inner city youth and LGBTQ and, all these marginalized groups. And I was like, slow your roll, honey. You're not going to be the savior. You're not going to be you're going to, be the middle-aged white woman who is going to tell you stories and, put little seeds all everywhere. and and watch them grow and watch them spread. And that's what I've come to the conclusion.
Right. I love it. And the word rebellion is a powerful word. Tell us what that means for you and how you share that in the work that you do with your clients.
So I love rebellion. I also use disruptor. I use, revolutionary, visionary, all these other kinds of very powerful words. And rebellion for me is I and the group that I'm, the community that I'm forming is disrupting the status quo. So we're rebelling against all these stories that women have been told. And so to me, it's like, yeah, I'm a rebel. I'm going, and being a rebel and a revolutionary came to me, later in life, like I said, after I got my PhD, because, for instance, I always felt like I was the black sheep of the family because I'm very different than the rest of my family, right? I'm the oldest daughter of an alcoholic, or he's recovered now, thank goodness. But growing up, he was an alcoholic. And so I had a very fraught, traumatic childhood. And I was always the one, but I was always the observer and the historian and holding up the mirror to the family like, this is BS. What are we doing here? Let's be honest. And someone said to me, and it kind of reminds me of what I'm doing in the world now, is you're not the black sheep. You're actually put into that family and put into this world to have other people look at the status quo and the cultural narratives and all these things differently, that we don't have to buy into this. We don't have to spend billions of dollars on makeup and, and getting our body, cut open and, plastic surgery and all those kinds of things. We don't need it. And so, so I'm not the black sheep. I'm actually leading a rebellion around, we don't have to buy this stuff. We don't have to buy any of this stuff and perpetuate the cultural norms and also capitalism and buying and doing. And so, yeah.
I love it. How do you break down the walls of polarization? And I mean, you kind of alluded a little bit politically about this country, but how do you break that down in the clients that you work with?
That is I just had like this revolutionary conversation that I've had a lot around men versus women, white versus black, Republicans versus Democrats, these verses, right? And I want to start talking about masculine versus feminine. We live in a toxic masculine. We need more feminine energy, So, but it's this versus, it's this fighting, this othering, which is what we're doing. We other people. And so I am now talking about men and women, Democrats and Republicans. I'm talking about gray, the messy kind of gray that's, it's so simplistic to say immigrants and residents, so simplistic to say men and women. So I'm trying to get us to a place where we're telling our stories and that we're realizing there's gray and that we're more similar. It sounds so cliche, but that we are more similar than dissimilar.
Yeah, I live in a world of gray, and it's a unique aspect because once you discover that or kind of move away from that divide, things open up a little bit more. So I welcome that kind of thought, and thank you for sharing it. What's the most rewarding aspect of what you do and the challenging aspect?
The most rewarding, I'll start with challenging first. The most challenging thing, I feel like sometimes I'm just talking into a hole, like no one's responding, and I'm just like talking to myself. And I love myself, but I don't love myself that much. Like I really want to inspire other people. But I'm learning that sometimes people are just quiet, and they are listening. And I've connected with, in the last week, I've probably connected with 5 people through LinkedIn that have said, you've really inspired me and I love what you're talking about and all that. So that's both the challenge of I'm kind of feeling hopeless. Like I said, January and February were kind of like a hopeless kind of blah month. And now I'm feeling, reinvigorated and people are saying, yeah, you're making a difference. And I'm so glad you said that. And I resonate with that. Here's my story.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the work that you're doing is so needed. Is most of the work that you do virtual, or is it? What's the percentage of the work that you do with people?
Well, right now it is virtual. It's, like I said, I do a lot on LinkedIn.
Right.
I do some workshops. I'm writing a book, and I am an activator, which is like, let's get it done. Let's,
Right.
When I got my PhD, everyone's like, this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And I've never done a marathon. I never planned to do a marathon. So I just went instant, but this book needs to be very thoughtful. And so right now I consult for a number of different businesses, and I'm doing heart-centered work around the Campo Kuniai Native American Reservation.
Wow.
And also distribution group here. So I'm doing things that I love. This work, my passion, is all related to all of that. But I don't have clients per se right now. I'm just getting out there, putting myself out there.
Two final questions because it goes fast. What advice would you give people out there? And two, how can people contact you?
Yeah, so I would, my advice is to, connect with me either through LinkedIn or Representation Rebellion. I would love to have a conversation with you. I think my advice for women is to practice self-devotion. Just being. We're so, and all of us are this way. I had a conversation that I was getting caught up on the masculine and feminine, and she says she looks at it as being and doing, and you need both. So you need to be compassionate, you need to breathe, you need to go out into nature, you need to nurture, all these kinds of things, and then you need to do something, right? You need, so it's this balance thing. So I think really starting to go outside for five minutes and just sit under a tree, or breathe 3 times at a stoplight. I mean, self-devotion doesn't mean going to a spa, capitalism, or buying this or that, or going on a trip. It's every single day checking in with yourself.
I love it. And again, how can people contact you?
My LinkedIn is LinkedIn Michelle Zive, and it's right there, linkedin.com in Michelle Zive, or Representation Rebellion. There's another way of getting a hold of me.
Well, Dr. Z, thank you for spending a few moments with us. We apologize Stephanie's not here, but the next time you come on, she'll be with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.